Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back Dr. Ed Pearson and introduce the students Thabo, Traoré, and Opeyeoluwa from Alabama A&M University, who recently completed the FICO Educational Challenge. I'm extremely proud to partner with Alabama A&M for the second time, and we congratulate you on completing this challenge. I want to dive into our experiences through the challenge and hear from the students and Dr. Pearson. But first, before we get there, I want to remind everyone, what is the FICO Educational Challenge? The FICO Educational Challenge is a program where we come up with an industry relevant and realistic problem that we present to students so that they can be prepared for the real life work as data scientists, working with real data, complicated data, huge amounts of transactions, and sort through how to develop AI models responsibly, ethically, and in ways that are performant. And to teach them essentially what are the skills required by the next generation of data scientists. This time around, we focused on financial fraud. The students had an opportunity to build fraud models, which consisted of profile-based models where they'd look at transaction data, come up with features to try to differentiate between the real transactions made by a legitimate cardholder and those that were more likely committed by a fraudster. Throughout this challenge, I and my mentors had an opportunity to work with the students as they went through this program of working with transaction data and coming up with these fraud models. Today, we will discuss that experience for Alabama A&M. But first, I want to start with a few questions for you, Dr. Pearson, just so everyone's familiar with you. And would you mind reintroducing yourself and your role at Alabama A&M?
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Ed Pearson, or Dr. Ed Pearson III. I am the Associate Dean for Student Success for the College of Engineering, Technology, and Physical Sciences. And I also serve as a professor in the computer science program.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. Appreciate that. And, this is the second year. So can you tell us a little bit, like, why'd you come back for year two? And how did you approach maybe the challenge differently this year than year one?
So we decided to participate again in the FICO Educational Analytics Challenge for the second year because of the numerous benefits our students gain from participating. The challenge allows students to hone their skills that they have developed during their time here at Alabama A&M, and it allows them to apply the knowledge from various areas in the curriculum, such as programming, critical thinking, mathematics, and communication, to real-world problems. Additionally, gaining this real-world experience through experiential learning activities like this challenge allows our students to enhance their marketability when applying for internships and career opportunities. And something we did different this year was, instead of hand-selecting students based on their skill sets, we decided to make it we opened it up and let students apply based on their interests, because we got a lot of interest from students based on the feedback that students who completed in year one. And so this allowed us to not only get students from the College of Engineering, but we also had a student from the College of Agricultural, Life, and Natural Sciences, which was a biology major that actually got a chance to participate this time.
That's excellent. And I love two of your points. I mean, one is that this sort of challenge is very differentiated in terms of potential future career opportunities, just because it's working with a real life problem and real life data, and that's really one of the things that we really wanted to do as part of the FICO Educational Challenge, is provide an opportunity to work on what they would work on if they took on careers as data scientists starting right out of school. And further to that, I love the fact that you opened it up more broadly across Alabama A&M. Data science has always been kind of a interdisciplinary sort of sport. Even on my team, I have psychologists, I have physicists and mathematicians, electrical engineers. Not many English majors, but I'm sure we could find some. But I think it's really important, and it talks to that diversity of thought and the way we approach problems. So that's wonderful, Dr. Pearson. one of the things that's always interesting as I look at how our schools participate in this is how teams kind of, group and how they decide to attack the problem and how it evolves over time. They come in all potentially, usually that, lots of energy and excitement, and then they run into some roadblocks. So what was that journey like for the teams? How did they kind of self-organize, and were everyone friends at the end as they worked through this?
So the students that applied, they all knew each other, and so they immediately, when they got selected, they started assigning tasks based on each member's strength. And so then they began to do some background research on credit card fraud and fraud detection. And as they became more familiar with the data, they had to pivot multiple times. And so additionally, the feedback from the FICO mentors also caused certain teams to have to pivot and regroup to make sure that they were on track. So the students worked well together, and at the end, they all still remained, had good working relationships, and they talked about how they enjoyed the difficulty of the task this time around as well.
That's great. Yeah, this one was much harder than year one, just from a technical perspective, and it's a problem that many practitioners in the field of AI just don't tackle. So yeah, it was a tough problem, but I could imagine that sense of accomplishment, right? Just tackle that, and part of that, getting through the challenge, right, is working with mentors, and that's one of the things that my team has really enjoyed is having mentors that work with students. So I was just curious, like, how did that dynamic work? Did the students take full advantage of their mentors, and and that experience, sort of experiential learning through some of those industry partners? What was that like?
So I would periodically check in with the students to see how they was progressing, if they encountered any obstacles while working on the challenge. And so during those times is when I would encourage the students to take advantage of the FICO mentors, because they were there to help. And occasionally, every now and again, there was moments where we had to emphasize that this was a learning experience, and we didn't expect them to know everything, and that it was okay to ask questions, and they should feel more comfortable with doing so. And so they really took advantage of their time with the mentors, and I think it showed during the final presentations.
It most definitely showed, and yeah, there are no there should always be questions, right? Because that actually allows us to learn too, right? This was actually, FICO gets a lot from this, as much as the students get from this, in terms of the way that they view their problems, the things that they go to first when they want to design, let's say, features and models, and what are the things that are interesting them, right? And I think it's a two-way sort of relationship for sure. So excellent. Dr. Pearson, as I mentioned, right, you're a second year. I really hope you'll join us for year three. But there are people that are listening in, and some of them are professors, at HBCUs and other universities. What would you offer to them in terms of like ways for them to explore, right, things like the FICO Educational Challenge to help empower the students? What advice would you have for them if they were sitting on the other end of this video, just listening in?
So I would say first, when preparing for the challenge, you want to select students that are eager to participate, as this will increase the likelihood for students to complete the challenge. And I mention this because there are weeks when the students have the material where self-motivation is critical, because the task can get kind of challenging. And so in addition to having self-motivated students and students that are willing to participate, I would secondly advise the faculty member to be cognizant of their academic schedule at their institution, because they don't want the challenge to be competing with other events going on campus. And my final bit of advice would be to ensure that the students participating have a solid foundation in the math skills necessary to be successful, because this will prevent them from needing to do preliminary studying to understand the data sets and the material.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that's very practical advice. And the challenge in many ways is not linear, right? It's not like okay, let's budget 3 hours a week. Some weeks I think these students were spending a full 40 hours maybe on it, trying to tackle through it. And they got social lives, and they got relationships, and they got family. So yeah, it's good to be aware and balance and work through that, because there are times where like anything, like even in work, right? Sometimes things are really, really busy. Sometimes things are a little bit more laid back, but appreciate that. Okay, so let's turn to the students to get their perspectives here. So Thabo and Ope, first of all, I want to congratulate you on completing this FICO educational challenge. As Dr. Pearson said, right, like selecting the right students with the right motivations is super important, because it is a commitment, and I'm sure you'll talk to that a little bit as we go through some questions. You know, I want to just mention, Ope, that you're a year 2, so you've done both year 1 and year 2. So I thank you for that, and your continued commitment to that FICO educational challenge. But just to start us off, right? You know, we try to make it fun, and it's competitive, right? And so one of the things that we had to do is to break into teams. So I wanted to see if you could just share, you know, your team names, and you know, maybe how you decided the name, because that's always fun. But also, you know, how did you decide to approach this challenge? And maybe Thabo, maybe you can go first.
Okay, so our team name was the Credit Guards, and we chose the name Credit Guards because our goal was to design or to learn to design models that could act like digital guards protecting credit transactions from fraud. So that was sort of the intuition around it. And then we started by exploring the data to find patterns that could separate from normal transactions, things like unusual hours, large gaps between transactions, or category changes. A lot of this had to involve a lot of research, a lot of reaching out. At one point, I actually used to reach out to my friends to see what they think about it. So that was a way that we sort of did the research and tapped into the exploratory data analysis. Then we moved into the feature engineering, where we created about 17 custom features focused on time, location, frequency, and behavioral changes. And then one of the key ones was the category theory, which tracked how often users repeated purchase types, because fraud cases often had strange switches in category. So this helped us capture that behavior. Then after building our features, we cleaned and standardized the data, balanced the classes, and of course, trained the models. We tested different model configurations using hyperparameter tuning and compared the performance using the area under the curve and the LAUC metrics. Throughout the process, we made sure to avoid any sensitive fields and kept fairness in mind, because even though this was a learning challenge, we still felt it was imperative to follow good AI practices.
Excellent. And maybe you can comment, how many weeks was the challenge, Thabo, for all that stuff? Because that's a lot there, right? How many weeks did you spend total?
10 weeks.
10 weeks,
yeah. Yeah, about 10 weeks.
Wow. So just for those listening in, right, there's a lot packed into 10 weeks for sure. Ope, what about yourself, the team name and approach to the challenge?
So our team name was Data Kings. I cannot take credit for that. That credit belongs to one of my teammates who goes by Mauion. I'm not very good at naming things, so I just defaulted to what she suggested. But the motivation was that we wanted to be kings of data sets, and we thought that was a good name, so we went with it. In terms of our approach to the project, I will say it started out very slowly, because we started out with 27 base features that were provided in the data set that we started with. So we had to first understand what each one represented and how that even dealt with transactions in general. I think it was good that we got to do the project, because we all have credit cards, even debit cards, and getting an in-depth look into how frauds can be detected or flagged, I think, was a great learning experience for the team. Our approach in general, one, we first said, okay, what do you think is a great idea for a feature? Like, just looking at this blanket data set that we have, how do you think you would go about identifying fraud? So we started out with things like unusual amounts. So we're college students. Typically, I don't think any person on my team would spend more than $100 in a week. So we thought, okay, it's reasonable to say if someone is spending above a certain limit, that figure wouldn't make sense, But it was also important to realize that we can't set a base limit for everybody because people have different spending, ranges. So an important thing we did was to come across an average. So an average for each individual account. So I don't have the same average that Thabo has or the same average that you have. So that really helped us build out a feature that was good. When we got to our midterm review, I think we only had about 6 features built out because we couldn't creatively come up with new features. So we had to spend a lot more time digging around, asking people, trying to reason. And at the end of the day, we came up with 23 features. I think one of the major things we came up with was our risk map feature. So we did this by calculating the average of the fraudulent transactions per every single feature and then applying that risk map onto new data sets. So we used training sets to create risk maps and then apply that onto test data sets. And I think that was really good for the team. We also ended up building about 8 different models. We built 2 logistic regression models and I think 6 different neural network models. It was not simple. I remember one particular weekend where I and my partner, Moi, we were running code throughout the night. So I would set an alarm, wake up, see that the code had failed, and I would tweak some things and restart it. So I think it was a great learning experience for the team. We built a model that could capture up to 95% of transaction fraud, and I think 96% of account level fraud. So all in all, I think it was a success for the whole team.
It was great, and you both illustrated something important, right? Which was like, really trying to think like a fraudster, right? And trying to understand what would that experience be like, right? And I think whether it's reaching out to friends, whether it's just putting yourself in those shoes, right? Really important because models are as good as the features we create, right? And so like really trying to understand how that occurs is important. And then I think each team came up with different features, right, and different innovations on top, right, to try to differentiate. And I love the comment about waking up in the middle of the night and having to tweak parameters. I think most data scientists have been there, particularly those on deadline. So you got the full experience there, Ope and the team. And I'm sure all teams work through that. So that's great. Thabo, I was curious, right? How did this challenge complement your existing data science knowledge? And what were some of the top learnings that you took away just as data science and from the project personally?
Okay, so I would say this challenge helped me grow drastically. It definitely made me cut down on the amount of time I slept because especially in the last couple weeks, I was averaging like maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So you could imagine how challenging that was, but it definitely helped me grow. My tech stack and my knowledge in machine learning is definitely way better because before this, I hadn't worked with data at this scale or depth. And then one thing I learned is sort of what you said, is that feature engineering really matters and that your model is only as good as the patterns you help it learn from. These are the features. Those were these become very instrumental because too much of them make everything imbalanced. Too little, it doesn't learn well. The wrong one and it becomes noisy. So knowing exactly what to put, where to put it, and like how much to implement is very important. Then another thing is learning to be careful with bias. It is very easy to make a model biased towards one sort of area. So even though this practice was a project or like learning challenge, but in reality, I would classify it closer to an internship. We still had to make sure our model wasn't, even though this may have results. And lastly, I realized how important it is to keep adjusting hyperparameter tuning, just like what Ope said. I remember at one point, I was doing so much hyperparameter tuning it was 4 a.m. and I was like, you know what, since it's already in the morning, I may as well not sleep. So I just kept tuning until like maybe 10 the following day. So it's important to keep adjusting and checking your assumptions to see if they're actually valid in the context of whatever you're working with, especially when you're dealing with messy real data, which could be categorized or not categorized. Those were my key takeaways.
I love it, Thabo. And, you know, I think, you know, one of the experiences that I see here a lot from the challenge, particularly this year, is, you know, students that have never used the type of software or haven't gone to, you know, leveraging, you know, the size of data. And, you know, I think just pushing through it, right? Then you have those skills that no one can take away from you, right? And then you could just, you know, bolster it and build upon it. And that's great. And then, you know, staying up till 4 a.m. and just pushing through to the next day, it gets addictive, right? This sort of pursuit for how to get that extra lift, and it's a good addiction, right? It's one that you know, you're really trying to get the right model, and you're absolutely right. In addition to this, one that's ethical and safe, and you know, I think lazy data scientists quickly build models and they celebrate a result, but they don't really understand what it is. And we've always talked about responsible AI and understanding and being ethical, and you know, you can build just as good models carefully and safely and ethically. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, that's one of the things that is super important that we don't lose sight of. Ope, I guess a question for you, right? You're the veteran. This is your second year as a participant in the FICO Analytics Challenge, and you know, you did year one. And year one, for those that are listening, was around bias in home lending data, right? So we kind of explored systematic bias that could be within the housing data, how to address it. And this one is a much more technically difficult one, right, around transaction analytics. And you know, you got to work with FICO and mentors in both years. How did the relationship, or how did the engagement with mentors differ, or did it differ at all in terms of, you know, what you needed or what your team needed from FICO and from the mentors as you went through year two, which was a very technically focused one, whereas year one was much more focused on sort of the responsible AI and ethical issues associated with AI. What were the differences from your perspective? Okay.
Thank you. So one of the major differences was that we had classes in the second one. So in the very first one, it was more of your team is free to explore different things, but you check in with a mentor once every week. Typically, we did Wednesdays. This year, however, as Scott has said, it was more technical. So we actually had classes every week. Class was on Monday and check-in was on Wednesday. For my team, that kind of proved to be slightly difficult, because if class is on Monday and check-in is on Wednesday, you have to have done something in between that time space. So you're not coming to check-in hours and saying, well, we just had class. So it really propelled us to work. You know, you had that in the back of your mind. I need to go to the Wednesday mentor check-in with something to say, my team tried this. This is what we experienced. Here are the results. And I think that was really, really good for us, because one, we weren't able to forget that there was something to work on. And the mentors were also invaluable. Marina and you were so invaluable to the work that my team did. They were really helpful, because even when we were stuck, they always had something to try. And it was good because they weren't doing the work for us. They were just giving us hints or pointing us in a direction that said, oh, I see what you're trying to do with this. And with the wealth of knowledge of experience that I have, here's how you can do better. I think there was a particular time when our graphs weren't making any sense. And the root cause of that was we had a feature that was causing that problem. That's why it's really important to know that sometimes your features can make or break your model. That singular feature was causing our model to perform horribly wrong. And it was because we had the right intentions with the feature, but we didn't write the proper code to have that feature do what we needed it to do. And it took a whole weekend of debugging with Marina and use help to kind of locate where that issue was. They were running some of our code and we were running our code. And eventually we got to what the root cause of the problem was. So I think their help was extremely invaluable to getting our project done. And I think having to meet data scientists who are also on the job doing this, because FICO does do this. They try to catch fraud for people. Seeing how they approach it on a different level from people who and not working in the field was also a great experience for us. You can kind of, whenever we came up with a feature that was good, we could sense the excitement. Like you could tell that we were on the right track because they would be so excited to say, "Oh my God, you guys got this. You guys saw this." And that was really good for my team. So I think the mentor experience was invaluable. They also helped with our presentation and the final report because originally on our presentation, we had about 60 slides. And they said, "You guys are presenting to people for about 20 minutes. You're not going to have time to explain everything on these 60 slides." So they were invaluable in helping us prioritize what was key and what to focus on. So I will say that going forward, I really, really hope that they continue to mentor and that FICO continues to provide that channel to reach out to whenever possible.
That's wonderful, Ben. And I'm glad you're so excited that you guys all produced 60 slides for the presentation. But yeah, they were right, and there's a time limit. But in addition to that, I think you bring up a really good point, and just something I'll comment on, which is that the way that they worked with your team, right, to debug and figure out where the problem was. We work that way together here at FICO, right? We always need to work together. There's not one person that necessarily can build these complex models. And so, helping each other and having a different perspective. And sometimes you don't see it, it's right in front of your face, right? And someone else might see it. And it's all about collaboration. And, one of the things that I love about FICO and just data science in general is, that you learn from each other. It's like this continuous learning. And every week you get a little bit smarter because you've looked at a problem differently or you've been challenged with something and you grow that way. So appreciate that. Well, we're getting towards the end, but before I get there, I want to emphasize, right, that for me and for FICO, it's really important that we develop the next generation of data scientists. It's a big part of what we do. So maybe the final question for you, Thabo and Opeyeoluwa, is like, what next? Like, will you kind of incorporate these skills into your future careers? What's your thoughts after getting through this challenge?
I think for me, I'm definitely way more interested in machine learning than before the challenge. Saying that, I'm going to do a lot of reading because it's interesting to understand where everything we use comes from, like going into the intricacies of the models like logistic regression, neural networks. I want to go into depth. And then I also plan to carry out what I learned into future projects, especially the habit of critically thinking about what I'm building and why. This challenge helped me slow down and really ask, does a certain feature make sense? Is this data reliable? And could this model create unintended consequences? So just being clear and focused on what you want to ask. So because it's easy to focus on only getting good metrics, but this experience reminded me that accuracy may not always be everything. You also have to think about whether what you're building is fair, explainable, and really useful, because no one's going to use what is not useful for them, even if it's perfect, because at some point over engineering could impact you. So that mindset shift is something I'm definitely going to apply going forward, especially as I work on more AI-related projects. And yes, I would absolutely recommend this program. It gives students hands-on experience with real messy data, not just textbook or classwork examples. And it pushes people to collaborate, to solve problems, and to think like someone working in the field. Then because of the mentorship, you always get direct feedback from the professionals, Marina and you, as Ope mentioned, which is huge. It's one of the few opportunities where you're expected to act like a real data scientist, and that experience is very hard to get in the classroom, and that's something I'm very grateful for.
Beautiful, thank you, Thabo. And okay, how about yourself? What's next for you after this sort of challenge, and your next steps here in your career as you explore data science?
Unfortunately, I'm graduating from college in a week or so. So I may not be able to participate in the FICO Analytic Challenge going forward. But I think the skills that you gain from projects like this are invaluable. Like Thabo said, one of the things that I asked everybody, even across other teams to Thabo's team, was that what changed? We realized that as we kept progressing, we had to go back to the beginning to kind of reevaluate what we were doing. We had gotten to week 9 and 10, and we still had to go back to week 4 to reevaluate things. And I think that skill is really important going forward in any project you're working on. That just because you've moved past something doesn't mean it has ended. In week 10, we were still looking, okay, what features could we possibly put back from the beginning that would have made this better? Or what knowledge do I have now that I'm like, if I knew this earlier? Because every week we were realizing something new. We were using WhatsApp as our messaging means. I would come to the group chat and be typing in all caps, guys, I figured it out. I think it makes sense now. And then 1 week later, you'd be like, you know what, maybe I wasn't very correct when I came screaming and I needed to do something differently. So that reevaluation, I think, is really important. Also, the collaboration. The team had to, okay, guys, we're meeting every Friday, we're meeting every Sunday. Sometimes we had to meet every day because the work is due and it has to be done. You want to make this better. In the beginning, it kind of started out as grudgy, guys, let's meet. But towards the end, everybody, because we were solving the problem, we were seeing the results. So everyone was kind of hyped to continue getting the work done. And I think that really helped. Another thing I told my team members was, this is a project that you can happily boast about on your resume. It's very detailed, it's very technical. And if you did do the project, you will be able to talk to anybody about it because you will have learned a lot. You would have learned a lot. It's not a project that you can skim the surface and say, yeah, I worked on transactions and I know 1 or 2 things. It's very detailed. We got to work with so many Python libraries, so many different frameworks that you come away with so much wealth of knowledge, not just in programming itself, but also in the field of data science and in the field of fraud detection. So I think it's a project that I readily endeavor and ask everyone to be a part of. I was asking my teammates, I said, are you guys going to do the challenge next year? And they're like, oh, it's a lot of work, but you learn so much doing it. And I think that's tremendous. Also, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Most of the projects you work on in college are things you cook up. They are things you come up with yourself, and you may not be able to challenge yourself as much as you should. This FICO Analytic Challenge, on the other hand, has been created to not only intrigue, but also challenge you. And I think that's a great opportunity. I'm taking all of this knowledge, all of this experience, and all of this, work ethic into my next phase of life. So I really say thank you to everyone who made this happen.
Thank you,
And just piggybacking what Ope said, since he's not going to be there next year, I will be more than happy to be the veteran for next year.
Excellent, Thabo. You're going to carry the torch. Well, you 2 gentlemen gave it quite an endorsement, and frankly, Dr. Pearson has joined us here. The whole Alabama A&M, all teams, all students were just phenomenal. I'll just say that we were tremendously impressed by everyone's dedication, everyone's effort, and frankly, I'm glad that you all got a lot out of it. But I'm also glad you got the fever, right? That it wasn't a chore to get through it. It was really that joy of learning and getting that experience. And Dr. Pearson, I've said it last time and I'll say it again. I really appreciate your partnership here. And I think, for me, this is exactly what I'd like the FICO Education Towns to result in is young minds with new skills and new excitement. And I really appreciate it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to conclude with, Dr. Pearson, but I'll leave it with you. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to the FICO team for allowing us at Alabama A&M to participate in the educational challenge, because it is really beneficial to our students. And as you can see, it has started a fever here on campus.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you again, Thabo, Ope, Dr. Pearson. Thank you for the partnership, and thank you for completing year 2. And Thabo, year 3. I'm already working on a great project, so you'll be there. Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening in.
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Wow, great conversation. I loved it. You guys were fun.
That was great. It was good.
Yeah.
Conversation flowed really well. Sorry, I forgot to drop the students off first because I was just enthralled in the conversation.
That's great. No, this was very, very good, guys. You know, obviously you did an awesome job, but in addition to that, thanks for, you know, motivating others maybe to give this a chance, right? And we just kind of spread that experience for others. I do appreciate that in doing this recording.
Yeah, you're welcome, because honestly, this challenge felt like, I would honestly say I learned more than I've learned in some of my classes. So that's how impactful it has been. And I think going forward, I actually have a clearer understanding of where I may want to go in terms of like my career field. So you could see that